Hi, and welcome back to the channel. This video may be a bit late, don't mind saying. I meant this to come out about a week ago, by the end of 2020, but here we are. Sickness, deciding to start a new fitness regime, and all those things kind of play into me being a bit late, but here are my favourite 10 releases that I watched from 2020. I haven't included any box sets because I think that's a bit unfair in individual releases. I might do a rundown of some of my favourite box sets, but I have to say, in box sets, that I tended to start a lot of them this year, but I didn't finish too many of them that I watched. I've made good starts on many things like Gamera, and BBS Story isn't this year, but I watched a lot of that this year. I'm nearly finished. I've Cinema in Conflict. I haven't started. Honestly, another reason why I can't call this a definitive top 10 of my releases is the weight of stuff that I didn't get watching this year would kill or test the strength of Cats Have 9 Lives if they were put on top of them. There's a lot of stuff. So let's just call this the top 20 or the top 10 releases that I watched in 2020 that I did watch, and not including the releases that I should have watched. So things like are in many other releases that are very popular choices like Come and See, etc. It's up there. Didn't get watching it. And I also wanted to highlight releases that, the server's recommendations. Anyone that's watched the channel for an extended period of time through the watch list, etc. will be familiar with many of these. But I did want to highlight some releases that I thought deserved a spotlight being put on them. Some have been mentioned by other people, some have not. And I'm going to start with number 10, with one of my discoveries of the year label-wise. And that is Third Window Films and Hanagatami, which I have watched subsequently from my watch list. I've watched it again. I was drawn to this movie. This is an Obayashi film. And Obayashi is the director of Houseu, which is a very famous work from the late 70s. That's, at best, let's call it a surrealist horror, in that he takes burgeoning special effects, I would say would be the nicest way to put it, to tell a fantastical tale of kids get lost in a house. Well, this is another fantastical tale, and it tells the story of some kids, except they're represented by adults. It's a bit confusing in that way. It caught me off guard the first time I watched it, and I'm still not sure it entirely works as well as you would have hoped, because it's these elder characters or actors playing these childlike characters who have formed a close friendship amongst themselves, and who form a close unit, and they all have very distinct caricatures and ideas. And Obayashi tells the story of a young character going to school and living with his aunt, I think it is. And he goes to school, meets a couple of characters. He's impressed by some, but they're all kind of a bit weird. There's the cool guy that you want to get close to. There's the person that's a bit off-kilter and a bit weird, etc. And it's, as you would expect in the Obayashi film, it's the imagery that is conjured and kind of how beautiful the film looks that carries you through this wave of what the story is trying to tell you. It's a bit hard to explain, Hanagatami, because it's a visual treat, like I say, more than a storytelling treat. But I think the same thing could be said of Houseu. And while I don't find Houseu as impactful as other people, I can see its roots kind of in here, insofar as what it's representing in the story that it's telling, and the relationships between these characters, and how they all get on with each other. And it's an utterly beautiful film that I've watched twice. I maybe have thought it was a 3.5 star the first time I watched it. When I subsequently watched it, it went up, and I consider that it'll probably go up again and again and again as time goes on. So that's Hanagatami. The next one is a very lauded release. It's not a new release if you're from America. It's a Criterion release, but it's from a very prominent filmmaker, and that is Eraserhead by David Lynch, which I had never seen before this year. It was spurned on or helped by L.A. Cohen's video, The Watch Along, that I watched after I'd watched it. It just kind of encouraged me to watch it, and I watched it beforehand on a streaming copy. I think it may have been the Criterion channel I watched it on. I'm pretty sure it was a Criterion channel that I watched it, and then I subsequently picked up the Blu-ray release, which is an absolute beauty. I mean, any of these things that ever get picked out, these digibooks, it has like such heft to it, and it slides out like an absolute dream. It's just, I don't know, these things are beautiful. But Eraserhead is, I would say, in many ways, typical David Lynch, and is again surrealist. But I can make sense of Eraserhead. Whether it's the intended outcome that Lynch was going for, I don't know, but I can definitely make the sense of a young father struggling with the anxiety of being a young father. We've great performance, as usual, by Jack Nance in a Lynch production. And while some people would say it's a bit icky and a bit disgusting, it again just feeds into this kind of sense of unease throughout the whole piece. There's a sense of unease that things aren't quite right, even from the light and the fact that it's in monochrome. It's almost shot like a noir film, and it just makes you feel very uneasy, as like I say, or that aren't right. I thought Eraserhead was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And while I haven't seen all of Lynch's filmography, I do feel like each film that I watch of Lynch's has its own flavour. I can see they're rooted in the same mental space as each other, but this one definitely has its own flavour and is very distinctly different from something like Mulholland Drive or something, insofar as it's definitely its own set theme and mood that it's going for. But that was Eraserhead. You probably didn't need me to recommend Eraserhead to you, but there it is. Number 8 was a real surprise. It's a documentary. It's America seen by a freshman from Hanagatami. And this is a 1960 film by Francois Reichenbach with the music by Michel Legrand. And it tells the story of a French documentary film crew starting in the west coast of America and making its way east and documenting America as they see it. So there are little vignettes of weird and wonderful things that you run into. There's a piece where they go to prison. There's a piece where they go to a twins convention. And they film the weird and the wonderful that's going along. They interview the people that are there as well. And the story goes that they got entry to all these places by basically showing naked pictures of Bridget Bardot. Or so that's what's revealed in the supplements. I adored this documentary. I'm not even sure why I picked it up. I didn't even know why it would appeal to me. But as usual, Hanagatami seen me well, seen me right, and give me a release that I was incredibly happy to watch and share with yourselves. Next one, which is 7, is one I haven't talked about in the channel, that I seen maybe a month or so ago, and it's an indicator release that I have heard a lot of people say was the worst indicator release of the year, but I've also seen it pop up in a lot of year-end lists, and that is Eve, starring the incredible Jean Moreau and Stanley Baker and Vierno Lisi, etc., etc. But it basically tells the story of a man, Stanley Baker, who has fallen for this beautiful young woman who doesn't happen to be Jean Moreau, but he becomes enticed by Jean Moreau. Jean Moreau is basically a high-class call girl who hires herself out in company and basically begs Stanley Baker's character not to fall in love with her. But he can't help himself. She's mysterious, she's cool, she's interesting, and he can't help but be drawn to it, even though repeatedly Jean Moreau says, no interest, go away. And he contrasts that with the love of what is a particularly beautiful woman in Vierno Lisi, who adores Stanley Baker's character. On the background, Stanley Baker is a famed scriptwriter, but there's some question as to where his inspiration comes from, etc., which runs the background of the movie. And there's a couple of different cuts in this movie, and I think it's one of the things that makes this a pretty incredible release. So it's an extended cut, there's a theatrical cut. I watched the extended cut because, everybody said they hated it, so I thought if they're going to hate it, let's see what the extended cut was so we get the fullness of the story, and I just thought it was fantastic storytelling. Jean Moreau is just one of those people on screen that is hard to ignore, and is hard to kind of say, oh God, I'll ignore that and not watch it. I just thought it was an utterly enticing and wonderfully shot and beautifully presented movie as you'd expect from Indicator. The supplements would absolutely knock you over with the amount of people talking through the inspiration for the movie, the characters in the movie. We have Joseph Losey's son talks through some of the bits. Losey himself discusses Eve. I mean, it's an absolutely ram-packed release. It's an absolutely brilliant film, in my opinion. A lot of people say it's very slow, sure, but it lets the characters and the story speak for itself. I thought Eve was fantastic. Next up, at 6, gonna get tough to split them now, is another third window films release, and it's Fish Story. And Fish Story isn't actually a recent movie, it's a 2009 movie, I believe, that tells the story of a lot of interlapping stories, one from 75, one from 82, one of 2009 and present day, where a meteor is coming to hit the ground and life will end in about 2 hours. That's the premise of the story to start off with. And it basically shows how this punk band in 1975 kind of sets out to save the world, or does it save the world? It's a bit over the top in terms of, you know, its idea. It's not taking itself seriously, but any film that's set in the Armageddon universe kind of takes some doing to be a brilliant movie. I don't think Armageddon's very good at all. Criterion Collection or not, but I think Fish Story is excellent. The quality of the stories and how it all links together, I couldn't help but smile from ear to ear to ear to ear the whole way through it at just how wonderful and delightful the writing, the acting, and how much the characters all link together. Especially when maybe about 15 minutes before the end you're going, where is this going? And yet it ties itself all together really wonderfully. I think Fish Story is one of those films or releases you must see this year, and let me know if you have seen it, because it's one that, again, I loved. Haven't heard many people talk about, but yeah, wonderful. Number 5 is a Eureka release. I really liked Eureka's output this year. I really did, but this one stands out and makes my top 10. It's The Man Who Laughs. Now, it's the old story about, it's the inspiration for the Joker, all of that kind of stuff by Conrad Veidt's character makeup artist, and there's no doubt that the makeup and the acting from Conrad Veidt is very reminiscent of the Joker, but this story has nothing to do with the Joker. The story starts with a nobleman being tortured and killed, and his son being stolen away after he gets disfigured by getting this enormous grin put in his face. And the character Gwynplaine is born, where he basically goes to the circus to live and get brought up. It's a bit Jungle Bookish, I suppose, insofar as he gets brought up in an environment out of the normal. And he grows up and he becomes a circus act because he has this permanent smile or disfigured face. But he becomes friends, or there's a burgeoning relationship with this character who's a blind woman called Dee, who utterly adores Gwynplaine, but he can't see that anybody would be attracted to him. He kind of basically says, you know, if only she could see my face, she would be disfigured, because he's a figure of ridicule. But as the film progresses and his nobility becomes to the rise, or comes to the fore, things start to change for him, and he's left with some questions. People both trying to destroy him and also, you know, seek his wealth or his nobility to be gone, but he has a life that he already has behind, and it's this push and pull towards the end of the film that I think is great. For a film that, when I started it, is 2 hours long, and I thought, God, how are they going to fill 2 hours long with what seems to be a very simple premise? The time flew by, and it was absolutely brilliant. I love The Man Who Laughs, and really, really enjoyed it. Number 4 is my first BFI release, and it is Toshio Matsumoto's Funeral Parade of Roses, a film that caught me totally by surprise. Again, another one that basically arrived in my door because I had it pre-ordered, looked interesting, had a bit of a reputation, was released on Eureka DVD many, many years ago. Lots of people said it was a classic, and it came, and it is an utter classic. I just think this film is something else. For a film released in 1969 about a subculture of trans-themed, that tells the story of an underground club, which is married men and then transsexuals, and how the culture of that club and the relationships of the people within that club, between the madam of the club, the new people that are in there, the owner of the club, and the people that are around there, and then the inner workings of the people that all get to know there. So, you know, the story surrounds Eddie, who's acted really, really wonderfully, I think, throughout. as the up-and-coming person in the club, who has a circle of friends, some of which are gay, some of which are not. And I think there's lots of little subtle things that make this film really kind of special. So there are things like, within Eddie's circle of friends, there is somebody that's imitating or wants to be Che Guevara. So they have the stick-on beard and they wear the cap, do all that kind of stuff. And it's the contrast between Eddie, who is very much making themselves up to be female, you know, with the hair and the curl and the clothes, etc. they wear, as seen as just the same as the person that is dressing themselves up to be Che Guevara or putting themselves up, that they're very much the same thing. And I think a lot of that stuff's really wonderfully and delightfully done. It is never stuck in your face, but underneath there's also an absolutely cracking film to watch with a great plot inside it, and one that really pays off, I think, at the end. I think this is an utterly fantastic piece of filmmaking. I love the fact that it's shot in a kind of documentary style, and that it's presented as fact, where they cut in the vignettes of people within the trans community in Japan and about how they grew up and how they feel in Japan, interspersed in the middle of the story, which were obviously, you know, part of the filmmaking journey that Matsumoto went on. But Funeral Parade of Roses is an absolutely stellar release, and I do like that BFI went to these skin over cases as well. I think they've made them, the releases, really pretty. Number 3 is my only Arrow video release. I suppose if you take out the box sets, the individual films are always enjoyable, but maybe they not always catch the eye. But I'm going to put After Midnight in. I adored After Midnight. Jeremy Gardner wrote, directed, acted in it, and it basically tells the story of a man who moves to the country with his girlfriend for a short period, and 10 years later, or it's not 10 years later, but a couple of years later, she's questioning whether they should stay there. She only went there for a while because of her love for him, and she leaves him. She gets up one morning and she's gone. She's written a note, and to him, in all intents and purposes, she has left. And while she's gone and he's in this house in the country all by himself, he is visited every night by a monster that you never see, but causes very visible damage to the outside of the house, except he's the only one that sees it. And the question for you as the viewer, and also for him as the character, is this just a manifestation or an expression of his loneliness, or is there actually a monster there? Justin Benson, being the sheriff, is in it, and he definitely doesn't believe that it's there at all. And this wonderful story gets told of a extremely likable character in Jeremy Gardner's character, who you just want him to have some resolution of happiness. He's miserable when he's been left on his own. He misses the love of his life. She's gone, doesn't know what's happening. She went away. Is she coming back? And at the same time, with that inner turmoil, he's fighting this demon every night with a sofa up against the wall, a hole for a shotgun, and wherever else. I just thought After Midnight was brilliant. I loved the resolution of it. I thought it was just utterly fantastic from start to finish, and it also has one of these soft touch slip covers. I know not everybody loves slip covers, but man, I could just touch this all day. Anyway, that's After Midnight. Utterly fantastic. Number 2 is one, well, this year wouldn't be this year without mentioning what has been my filmic discovery this year, and that is the films of Pedro Almodovar. I've talked about this quite a lot, and my favourite of that actually got a Criterion release this year, which is all about my mother. Now, I have seen about 8-9 Almodovar movies this year. I just cannot get enough of them. I love every one of them dearly. I'm just so excited every time I get the chance to watch a new one. Thankfully, I have saved some that I haven't seen all the way, or haven't seen the whole filmography of. They're great to see. But I think All About My Mother stands out on its own above anything else, because All About My Mother tells the story of well, it starts off with a young man who is very interested in writing and all that kind of stuff, and goes to see a play with his mother, and spoiler for the first 15 minutes, he gets killed at the start. But before he's killed, he wants to know about his father, and the mother agrees to tell him in due course, but of course he is killed. Now, after he's dead, his mother basically sets about to inform the father about the relationship and the fact that the son was there, because he never none of them ever got to meet each other or knew about each other's existence really in the early days. And so she goes back to where she previously lived, and goes back into the life that she had beforehand and meets the characters there. Now, one of the wonderful things about Almodovar's movies is that you end up getting characters that you don't normally see as prominent characters in other movies. So there's always a deeply sexualized nature in Almodovar's movies, and in this case, again, trans is a big theme in it, as a lot of the characters are trans. And honestly, the film is just a delight from start to finish. As she gets to meet other characters like Penelope Cruz's character, and the whole thing, I think, is a joy from start to finish. It is my favourite Almodovar movie that I've seen this year, and I have seen many of his favourites, but there is just a special quality about All About My Mother. There's a resolution and a joy in it that you don't often see in many Hollywood movies. And if you haven't checked out any of Almodovar's movies, start with this one and make your way through. I dare say you will not be disappointed. Which leads me to my number one release of the year, and to me this changed everything for me this year. And it is a BFI release, and it is, if anybody's watched the channel, it's Women Make Film, the Mark Cousins documentary about the relationship of film with women filmmakers. And it's a 14-hour documentary broken up into 5 discs. I can never remember. No, 4 discs. 4 discs. It's not the nicest housing in the world. I hate these bigger cases, I have to say, because they never really feel like they close properly. There's a nice booklet. But it takes you through the aspects of filmmaking as shown through the lens of women filmmakers. I think mainly to show about their quality and how fantastic in there. So you get people like Ida Lupino, you get people like Kylie Reichardt, you get people like Donna Deutsch, you get people like Catherine Bigelow, and a whole lot more besides. He breaks filmmaking into a number of different categories and then showcases many of those films or those techniques in the film. And it doesn't sound like an incredible piece of filmmaking, but it is utterly wonderful. I just think this changed the way I will watch films for the rest of my life, which is kind of, like, documentaries are supposed to change you in some way, I think, when you educate yourself. The other thing that's incredibly powerful about this is in the booklet. There is an introduction put in, but halfway through, what we get is a list of the films that are featured within it. Every film that's in it, every director that's in it, so that you can then have a watch list of 1,000,000 miles long. So if you want to get, a list of films that you should watch, they're all in here, pretty much. I just want to watch kind of all these movies after seeing it. It represents so many of the things in amazing ways. Even films that I have seen before, I can't wait to see again. The list of filmmakers in terms of females is just never ending. There are a lot of people I'd never heard of, a lot of people I had heard of, but all people that I want to see more things of. And Women Make Film, like I say, I cannot watch a film without looking for many of these techniques and things again. So if you're interested in filmmaking, make this a good place to start. It's utterly fantastic. And there's my list of 10 releases that I really appreciated this year, that were a bit outside the norm, and that were, things that changed the way I looked at film. I learned a lot this year about film. I really enjoyed my film journey this year. I hope to continue it in 2021. But most of all, I thank you for taking the time of getting to the end, seeing what was on here. And I've really appreciated many of the community's own videos. I've really appreciated getting to know a lot of you this year. I only started the channel this year, and it really has been one of the most fulfilling things of the entire year, whether you're part of the YouTube community in terms of films and making videos, or whether you're just one of the people that comments, because the same people that comment in my videos comment in many other people's, and I really love those interactions in the community. Thanks so much for watching. I'll catch you next time. Take care. Bye.